ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 25, the characteristics of King Puranjan. So we are at text 54. So I'm in the auspicious Odidham of Bangalore, Sheshadripuram. So text 54. अंधौ अमीशां पौराणां निर्वाक स्पेशस्कृतौ उभौ अक्षरवताम् अधिपतिस्ताभ्यां ताभ्यां याति करोति च. Translation.
Translation. Of the many inhabitants of this city, there are two persons named Nirvak and Pesakrit. Although King Puranjana was the ruler of citizens who possessed eyes, he unfortunately used to associate with these blind men. Accompanied by them, he used to go here and there and perform various activities. Purport. This is a reference to the arms and legs of the living entity. The two legs do not speak, and they are blind. If a person simply trusts his legs to take him walking, he is likely to fall into a hole or bump into something. Thus, led by the blind's legs, one's life may be placed in jeopardy. Of the senses that are working, the hands and legs are very important, but they have no eyes to see. This means that in the hands and legs, there are no holes. In the head, there are many holes, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. But lower down, in the arms and legs, there are no holes. Consequently, the arms and legs have been described as andha, blind. Although the living entity has many holes in his body, he nonetheless has to work with his hands and arms. Although the living entity is the master of many other senses, when he has to go somewhere, do something, or touch something, he has to use his blind legs and hands. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So this Puranjan, he had many inhabitants of this city, but especially he was associating with two persons who were actually blind because they had no eyes to see. And their names was Nirvaka and Peshakrit. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains these are the two hands and two legs, Nirvaka and the Peshakrit, where King Puranjan used to associate with them and perform lot of activities blindly. Blindly has two meanings. One meaning here is blindly because the hands and legs on their own cannot see and they have to be guided for to perform the activities. Although all the activities is performed by hands and legs, but they cannot see. And second is the whole machinery is blind to the real seeing, that is apaschadam atma tattvam. Okay, text 55. Sayarhi antapura gato vichushin samanvitah moham prasadam harsham va Yati jayat atmajodbhavam. Translation.
Sometimes he used to go to his private home with one of his chief servants, the mine, who was named Vishuchina. At that time, illusion, satisfaction, and happiness used to be produced from his wife and children. Purport. According to the Vedic conclusion, one's self is situated within the heart. As stated in Vedic language, Hridayam Atma Pratishtitaha. The self is situated within the heart. In the material condition, however, the spirit soul is covered by the material qualities, namely goodness, passion, and darkness. And within the heart, these three qualities react. For instance, when one is in goodness, he feels happiness. When one is in passion, he feels satisfaction through material enjoyment. And when one is in darkness, he feels bewilderment. All these activities are of the mind and they function on the platform of thinking, feeling, and willing. When the living entity is encircled by wife, children, and home, he acts on the mental plane. Sometimes he is very happy, sometimes he is very much satisfied, sometimes he is not satisfied, and sometimes he is bewildered. Bewilderment is called moha, illusion. Illusioned by society, friendship, and love. The living entity thinks that his so-called society, friendship, and love, nationality, community, etc. will give him protection. He does not know that after death he will be thrown into the hands of a very strong material nature that will force him to accept a certain type of body according to his present work. This body may not even be a human body. Thus, the living entity's feeling of security in this life, in the midst of society, wife, and friendship, is nothing but illusion. All living entities engaged in various material bodies are illusioned by the present activities of material enjoyment. They forget their real business, which is to go back home, back to Godhead. Everyone who is not in Krishna consciousness must be considered to be in illusion. One's so-called feelings of happiness and satisfaction resulting from material things are also illusions. Factually, neither society, friendship, love, nor anything else can save one from the onslaughts of the external energy, which is symptomized by birth, death, old age, and disease. To get even one living entity out of the illusory condition is very difficult. Therefore, Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.14, Daivihi esha gunamayi mama maya duratya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantate. This divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Therefore, unless one surrenders completely at the lotus feet of Krishna, he cannot get out of the entanglement of the three modes of material nature.
Yeah. Now, Puranjan, he used to go to his private home along with his chief servant, that is the mind, and his name is Vishuchina. And at that time, various feelings were generated within his heart. Moha prasadam harsham. Moha, prasad, and harsha, illusion, satisfaction, and happiness is generated with his interactions with his wife and children. Right. So, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that Riddesha Arjuna, that the Atma and Paramatma both are situated in the region of the heart, and that is also confirmed in the Vedic language. Riddhema Atma Prasidata, that it is the place of the heart where Atma is situated. And the spirit soul is covered by the three material qualities: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And now let us read slowly the remaining words. And within the heart, these three qualities react. Okay. So heart is the place where these three qualities they react, and thus different feelings are generated. When the reaction is in the mode of goodness, there is a feeling of happiness. When it is in the mode of passion, then there is a feeling of material enjoyment. And when it is in darkness, one will feel moha, that is bewilderment. Therefore, moham prasadam harsham va. Moham is darkness, prasadam is goodness, harsham is passion. All these activities happen within the heart and they are expressed through thinking, feeling, willing, and ultimately acting through the two friends which are blind in nature, that is, two hands and two legs. Right. Further, Srila Prabhupada explains that whenever a living entity is surrounded by the material byproducts, he feels very happy. But ultimately, it proves to be a bewilderment, illusion, and thus illusioned by society, friendship, and love. The living entity is simply entrapped in these ideas. And he feels happy in the present work and continue to feel happy and thus fools himself. So what is important is, of course, when one is acting, one has to act very well. And when one is taking care of the family, one has to take care of the family, not considering just my family, but considering this to be Krishna's family. And then entire family business will become, the Vaishnava Seva and a spiritual affair. At the same time, one has to also realize that this family, right, which is in the service of the Lord, and I am taking care of the family as a service to the Supreme Lord. And therefore, devotees have a very good, devotees are masters of this, Yukta Vairagya. They write this ICO. Anybody knows what the ICO is?
In charge of,
Okay,
in
very
care of.
good. In care of. Okay, so devotee is right. ICO, that is in care of. These are such amazing words, ICO, it's in care of. So devotee has this complete understanding, right? Further, Srila Prabhupada explains that the feelings of happiness and distress, they are ultimately coming from the feeling of birth, old age, disease, and death. And this is how a living entity who is not Krishna conscious will be thoroughly bound. Only solution is Mamik Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. One has to completely take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then he can very easily come out of these three modes of material nature. Text 56. एवं कर्मसु संसक्त कामात्मा वंचितो बुधः महिषी यद्यत् तत्तदेव अन्ववर्तत. Translation.
Being thus entangled in different types of mental concoction and engaged in fruitive activities, King Puranjan came completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated. Indeed, he used to fulfill all the desires of his wife, the queen. Purport. When the living entity is in such bewilderment that he is under the control of his wife or material intelligence, he has to satisfy the intelligence of his so-called wife and act exactly according to her dictates. Various shastras advise that for material convenience, one should keep his wife always satisfied by giving her ornaments and by following her instructions. In this way, there will be no trouble in family life. Therefore, for one's own social benefit, one is advised to keep his wife satisfied. In this way, when one becomes the servant of his wife, he must act according to the desires of his wife. Thus, one becomes more and more entangled. In Bengal, it is said that if one becomes an obedient servant of his wife, he loses all reputation. However, the difficulty is that unless one becomes a most obedient servant of his wife, family life becomes disturbed. In the Western countries, this disturbance gives rise to the divorce law, and in Eastern countries like India, there is separation. Now, this disturbance is confirmed by the new introduction of the divorce law in India. Within the heart, the mind is acting, thinking, feeling, and willing, and falling under the control of one's wife is the same as falling under the control of material intelligence. Thus, one begets children by his wife and becomes entangled in so many activities under the control of mental concoctions.
Evam karmasu samsakta. Thus, being entangled in the different types of mental concoction and engaged in fruitive activities, King Puranjan came completely under the control of the material intelligence and thus was thoroughly cheated. And this is here the who is the wife of King Puranjan? Yes. Who is the queen?
This body, Prabhu?
Nahi. Body is the city. Navadware Pure Dehi.
तुझी intelligence.
Mind.
Mind.
Intelligence. Okay. So here, every living entity, it is although it is described with reference to wife. So here, Puranjan is the king, and his own intelligence, which is acting materially, especially in the realm of karma kanda and the mental concoction, right? Fruitive activities and mental concoction is considered as the queen. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, when a living entity is in such a bewildered condition, he comes under the control of his wife or material intelligence. So this shloka is not only spoken for husbands, it is spoken for wife also. It is spoken for every living entity who is under the control of material intelligence, right? Figuratively, that is the way, and typically also it is spoken accordingly, right? Srila Prabhupada explains, for the material convenience, one should keep one's wife very satisfied, okay, and not to do injustice to husbands. Wife should also keep husband very satisfied, okay, and therefore, and then Srila Prabhupada explains, and thus parasparam bhavayanto. What happens is that if husband and wife, if they are not guided by spiritual master, what happens is the intelligence will only lead towards the material activities. And one after another, material activities will lead to the mental concoction, excessive mental concoction. Right. And this one person is completely entangled. So this is applicable to every living entity. About the house in, the grihastha, the house literally become grihasthashram, not by building a house, taking a EMI and a loan or something like that. That is not the house it becomes. Griha becomes only by Griha Lakshmi. So, the place where wife is suitably respected. Okay. Right. That is a very important place. So Grihasthashram will be satisfying to the degree the lady in the house will be peaceful and satisfied. This is very, very important. And of course, the lady in the house also should show some compassion to the man in the house. But the entire Grihasthashram revolves around the lady in the house. We have a very simple realization in so many that when you teach Bhagavad Gita to a man, he becomes a devotee. But when you teach a Bhagavad Gita to the lady in the house, entire family becomes a devotee. Right? Because the Grihastha ashram literally revolves around the lady in the house. So this is being mentioned here. Text 57 to 61. So it's a long verses. Okay. I think we'll directly go to, I'll try to read this one second. क्वचित् पिबन्त्यां पिबति मदिरां मदविह्वलः अश्नन्त्यां क्वचिदश्नाति चक्षत्यां सह चक्षति क्वचित् गायति गायन्त्यां रुदन्त्यां रुदति क्वचित् हसन्त्यां हसति जल्पमत्यामनु जल्पति क्वचित् धावति धावत्यां तिष्ठन्त्यां मनुतिष्ठति अनुशेते शयायानाम् अन्वास्ते क्वचिदासितं क्वचित् शृण्वति शृण्वत्यां पश्यन्त्यामनुपश्यति क्वचित् जिघ्रति जिघ्रत्यां पृश्यन्त्यां स्पृशति क्वचित् च शोचति जायां मनुशोचति दीनवत् अनुहृष्यन्ति हृष्यन्त्यां मुदितामनुमोदते. Translation.
When the queen drank liquor, King Puranjan also engaged in drinking. When the queen dined, he used to dine with her. And when she chewed, King Puranjan used to chew along with her. When the queen sang, he also sang. Similarly, When the queen cried, he also cried. And when the queen laughed, he also laughed. When the queen talked loosely, he also talked loosely. And when the queen walked, the king walked behind her. When the queen would stand still, the king would also stand still. And when the queen would lie down in bed, he would also follow and lie down with her. When the queen sat, he would also sit. And when the queen heard something, he would follow her to hear the same thing. When the queen saw something, the king would also look at it. And when the queen smelled something, the king would follow her to smell the same thing. When the queen touched something, the king would also touch it. And when the dear queen was lamenting, the poor king also had to follow her in lamentation. In the same way, when the queen felt enjoyment, he also enjoyed. And when the queen was satisfied, the king also felt satisfaction. Purport. The mind is the place where the self is situated, and the mind is conducted by the intelligence. The living entity situated within the heart follows the intelligence. The intelligence is herein depicted as a queen, and the soul under mental control follows the material intelligence just as a king follows his wife. The conclusion is material intelligence is cause of bondage for the living entity. The point is that one has to take spiritual intelligence to come out of this entanglement. In the life of Maharaja Ambarisha, we find that great Maharaja first engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. In this way, his intelligence became purified. Maharaja Ambarisha also used his other senses in the service of the Lord. He engaged his senses in seeing the deity in the temple, nicely decorated with flowers. He engaged his sense of smell by smelling the flowers, and he engaged his legs by walking to the temple. His hands were engaged in cleansing the temple. His ears were engaged in hearing about Krishna. His tongue was engaged in two ways, in speaking about Krishna and in tasting prasada offered to the deity. Materialistic persons who are under the full control of material intelligence cannot perform all these activities. Thus, consciously or unconsciously, they become entangled by the dictations of material intelligence. This fact is summarized in the following verse. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. So now, whatever the queen did, that means whatever the intelligence performed, the king helplessly performed the same activity. When the queen drank liquor, he also drank liquor. When the queen dined, he also ate. When the queen chewed, he also chewed. When the queen sang, he also sang. When the queen cried, he also cried. What it means is that, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, the mind is the place where the self is situated, and the mind is conducted by intelligence. Man, buddhi, ahankar. So when we see the chariot of the body, what is the man, what is the buddhi, and what is the ahankar? Chariot is ratha, right? The senses are the five horses. But what is the intelligence? What is the mind? Mind is the reins.
Reins.
The intelligence is the sarthi. And the passenger is helplessly following wherever the sarthi is taking. Where exactly we are seeing that the passenger, who is the King Puranjan, is helplessly following where the material intelligence is taking him to. And therefore, Prabhupada says the conclusion is that the material intelligence is the cause of the bondage for living entity. And therefore, we have to start thinking spiritually. And this is, not an abrupt process. This is not that we do it in a day. But the point is, we have to basically understand Shastra, and slowly we have to focus on Tasmat Shastra Pramanam Te Karya Akarya Vyavasthito. Correct. That the Shastra should become Praman for Karya and Akarya. What is to be done, what is not to be done, and not the material intelligence. And when we, just like we are studying Bhagavad Gita, we are studying Srimad Bhagavatam, and what happens because of this? Slowly, our Shastra Chakshu will develop, and we will be able to understand the situation as per Shastras want us to understand. Right. So we have to, what is Shastra Chakshu? Shastra Chakshu means, currently we have Charma Chakshu. Charma Chakshu means the eyes which are made up of the skin. But and they will see whatever material intelligence wants to see. But the Shastra Chakshu means we will see how the Shastras want us to see. And this happens when one engages one's mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. And this was perfectly done by Maharaj Ambarish. Savai mana Krishna padaravindayor. And when he engaged his mind in Krishna's service, who is the principal servant, all the 10 servants, correct? Here we are seeing the 10 strong bodyguards were being protecting the queen. They also naturally engaged in the service of the Lord. Then Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane, Karau Hare Tad Mandira Marjanadishu, Shrutim Chakara, Achyuta Satkathodaya. So, materialistic person who are under the full control of material intelligence cannot perform all these activities. They consciously or unconsciously, what happens? They will be carried away by the dictations of the material intelligence, and this is what is being summarized here. One of the classic example of the king following the queen. Can somebody give a quick classic example? The names, 2 names. Helplessly following the queen. One just we have seen some chapters back. Correct. Maharaj Uttanapad, right. So Maharaj Uttanapad was helplessly following the queen. And second is example of Dasharath Maharaj, who was also, when Lord Ram was banished, he could not say no to Kaikeyi. So this is the example of that, helplessly following the material intelligence, right? So now we come to the last verse. It has a long purport. We will not be able to complete it. Text 62. Vipralabdo मह्यैषैवं सर्वप्रकृतिवञ्चितः न इच्छेद अनुकरोत्यज्ञ क्लैब्यात् क्रीडामृगः यथा. Translation.
In this way, King Puranjan was captivated by his nice wife and was thus cheated. Indeed, he became cheated in his whole existence in the material world. Even against that poor, foolish king's desire, he remained under the control of his wife, just like a pet animal that dances according to the order of its master. Purport: the word Vipralambha is very significant in this verse. Vi means specifically and pralamba means obtained. Just to satisfy his desires, the king got the queen and thus he became cheated by material existence. Although he was not willing to do so, he remained a pet animal under the control of material intelligence. Just as a pet monkey dances according to the desires of its master, the king danced according to the desires of the queen. In Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.2, it is said, Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimukte. If one associates with a saintly person, a devotee, one's path of liberation becomes clear. But if one associates with a woman or with a person who is too much addicted to a woman, his path of bondage becomes completely clear. On the whole, for spiritual advancement, one must give up the company of women. This is what is meant by the order of sannyasa, the renounced order. Before taking sannyas or completely renouncing the material world, one has to practice avoiding illicit sex life, licit or illicit is practically the same, but through illicit sense, one becomes more and more captivated. By regulating one's sensual life, there is a chance that one may eventually be able to renounce sensual life or renounce the association of women. If this can be done, advancement in spiritual life comes very easily.
Yeah, so we will read in the section. Vipralambo Mahiyesham Sarva Prakriti Vikrita. So here the king Puranjan was captivated by his intelligence and thus was thoroughly cheated for the whole existence. And he came under the control of his wife. Again, wife here is referring to the intelligence, just as the pet animal who dances according to the order of his master. Klaibya, Krida, Mruga, Yatha. Very, very strong words. Okay. Klaibya is like Napunsak it is. Klaibyamma Smagaha Partha. Okay, Bhagavad Gita, Lord becomes angry at Arjuna and he says that what is this? Hridaya Daurbalyam, Klaibyam. In Ayurveda, there is one disease also which is called as Klaibya. Okay, so very closely related. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains Vipralamba, and Vipralamba means V means specifically, it is intensifier, right? And Pralamba means obtained. So, just to satisfy his desire, the king got the queen, or the living entity got the intelligence, and thus he was thoroughly cheated in the material existence, right? And therefore, the material intelligence, here the queen is compared to material existence, and woman is used, the word woman is from that perspective, the material intelligence. That even the man has woman, that means material intelligence. Okay, so that is to be taken. So Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimukte Tamodwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. Okay. So if once associate with the saintly person, with the devotee, the path of liberation will become widely open. But if that association with the material intelligence or somebody who is enamored by material intelligence, then the bondage will become very, very open. The path to the bondage will become open. And then Srila Prabhupada describes that one has to dissociate with the material intelligence, and that is sannyas. So, sannyas is, forbidden in Kali Yuga. Very, very few people can take sannyas. We have seen that. Ashwamedham Gaval, sannyasam palapitrukam. So, what it means is that progressively, age appropriate, one has to come out of the material intelligence and slowly turn activities towards the spiritual activities. One should not be simply enamored by the sensual pleasures all through one's life, right? Nowadays, there are clinics and there are big, big ads which come actually in the newspaper where they say that, the sensual life after 60. Now too you have no, there is no problem only. You can just keep on enjoying. A few years back, there was there was this uh, stimulant was discovered, Viagra, and Jayadvaita Maharaj had written a very beautiful article in Back to Godhead. And the word Viagra basically comes from the Sanskrit word Vyagra. Okay, and they said that you just take our medicine and all your senses will be roaring like a lion, Vyagra. So and that's from that Viagra came up. And that's kind of a stimulant for the sensual activities. So the point is that at some point of time, one has to realize the futility of material engagement, licit or illicit, and one has to control the activities. And finally, the more activities should be Krishna conscious activities. Otherwise, one will be thoroughly cheated. And that example of thoroughly cheated is going to come in the 6th canto. And that example is Ajamila, right? So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai,
Yeah.
Gaurava.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhu, one small question.
Yes.
Just thinking like, why would the intelligence is only framed as a intelligent lady or like wife here? Why not mind? Generally, we follow mind. Intelligence is, intelligence so we follow, but many times we follow the mind also.
No, we follow mind, but the mind is supposed to be controlled with intelligence. So that's why that analogy, mind is compared to the reins, lagam. Right? But intelligence is the sarthi who is controlling the mind. So through Viveka Buddhi, one is supposed to control the mind and then ultimately control the senses.
But here I understand. Bro. Here Puranjan is basically is not using his intelligence, or not talking about he maybe in that sense.
So in this case, because the intelligence is only material intelligence, the mind also naturally followed mind also became loose and senses also became loose.
Okay.
And they were not moving to the desired direction of self-realization. That is the understanding. In this case, the Maharaj Prachina Barihi was so civilized. His distraction was not, breaking regulative principles. His distraction was not getting attracted to the ultimate goal of life. His distraction was karma kanda and jnana kanda.
Yes, Professor.
That was his distraction. But in the case of the ordinary case, the distraction is literally a very sinful distraction in the sense that no one is getting attracted to the news, meat eating, gambling, and all those things. So here, Prachinabari is a very saintly personality, but he's just unaware of the ultimate goal of life and thus became distracted. In the sense, he was not on the right track of self-realization. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.